What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Eastern Current. Sorry we didn't get one out last week. 4th of July week was very busy, and I had all intentions of getting one done, and then next thing I knew, it was Saturday, and it just never happened. So I got another captain from North Carolina on today. Excited to have him on here. We've been trying to do it for a little while. I think I text him every time we get a bad weather day. I'm like, hey, can you go today? And we keep trying to make it happen, but we made it happen this morning, so we're stoked. And I will introduce him here in a second. Beforehand, definitely go check out the Facebook group, Eastern Current Fishing on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram, on YouTube, and on all the podcast platforms. So if you haven't checked any of those out, definitely go check them out. But I'm going to go ahead and introduce Captain Andy Bates. What's going on, man?
What's happening, Jud?
Oh, nothing much, man. I'm stoked we were able to get a podcast going.
Man, been looking forward to it.
Yeah, I've been a follower of yours online for a while, and I'm like, man, I know if we lived near each other, we'd be buddies, because got the big beard, you fish similarly to me, so I'm like, you like to shoot ducks too, so stoked that we're able to at least start an online friendship here. But yeah, so thanks for coming on. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about who you are, where you kind of grew up, how you got into fishing, how you started guiding, where you are, and just give us your kind of your little backstory.
All right, well, I'll try to make it short and sweet. I grew up as a Navy brat, if you want to call it that. My dad retired Navy, so I've lived a little bit all over the place. Virginia, spent a good portion of my adolescence, like 10 to 16 years old, in Washington State, on the Puget Sound. So that's where I really, started, getting my love for the saltwater specifically, and learning the salmon fishing and fly fishing for trout. Started duck hunting out there, and then come to North Carolina in 2003 with the Marine Corps, and my wife's from Pennsylvania. She said she wasn't never going back to Pennsylvania, so here we are. And yes, I've been fishing North Carolina down here on the coast hard since 04, 05-ish, 06. Really started, and very fortunate to fall into a good group of guys in the Cape Lookout Fly Club specifically, and then some others, and just really developed a passion for everything down here, and kind of always pictured myself as a guide, but more of like an out west big game / trout fly fishing guide. And,
right.
Stayed here and put everything together, and a lot of help along the way has kind of got me to where I'm at now.
Heck yeah. I think that's a lot of people's vision as guiding at first. Like, when you're young, you're like, I think I want to be a guide when I'm older. Like, you picture like being an elk hunting guide, or like guiding pheasant out in South Dakota or something like that. And then some of us end up here on the East Coast, and I wouldn't change it for a thing. I love it over here, but
no, it's we've got an awesome place down here. Obviously, we have our issues and everything like everywhere else, but to be, as well-rounded, it's just super diverse fishery all up and down our coast here.
For sure.
And hunting opportunities as well. But yeah, it's hard to leave. Get a few days off or whatever. People would go here and there. There's still a lot of stuff I like to learn and explore down here.
I know. It's crazy how diverse our coast is, from the South Carolina line to the Virginia line, and really so where you are. I mean, you've got just north and just south of you, like completely different bodies of water that fish totally differently. Has that been something that has? I feel like at first it's probably intimidating, but afterwards it's probably really exciting to like have that diversity around and being able to.
We actually, the house we're currently living in, we specifically picked this location so I can be 5 minutes from, the tidal marshes around Beaufort, and 15 minutes from the Neuse River.
Yeah.
We actually bought a house in this location so we could, capitalize on it all.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. It's it really is. The grass is always greener though. Sometimes, whether it's like, oh, I wish I was I was in the Keys, or I was in Montana, or like. A lot of times I find myself drooling over y'all's fishery and stuff up there, and I talk to some buddies up there and like, man, we wish we had that clean water that y'all have, but you really have like a good mixture of the two, like right where you are. I think you got the best blend of both worlds. So you've got a bunch of like tidal stuff that you fish, and you got a bunch of pretty slack water. So I'm excited to kind of pick your brain. I think today we were talking, we're going to kind of focus on redfish. And so I think that you'll be a really good, voice of reason as far as having all that type of fishing right there in front of you. What do you find yourself drawn more to in the red fishing? Is there like a type of estuary that's close to you that you prefer to redfish?
I mean, obviously the sexy tidal marshes with super clean water and the grass flats is, it's pretty textbook stuff. But there's something to be said about just a nasty blow day and going up, to the sound and bait fishing, the whitewater and getting into big schools of fish like that too. So pretty much whatever the best conditions for that particular day is what I'm looking forward to fishing. If it's covering ground and making a lot of blind cast on shorelines or flats and drops offs up on the sound, or if the tide and the winds are perfect and it's more of doing stuff like I assume y'all do a lot of down there, the flats fishing stuff, whatever the conditions allow. And then some days we're fishing structured with cut bait. So I don't know, obviously the tidal marsh and grass flat stuff is probably the most appealing, but not every day it's conducive, productive, going to be productive.
Right. So. Yeah, I think that just comes with time, is knowing where you need to be and when. People always ask me, they're like, this is a question I get all the time, just guiding, is like, what's the best tide for redfish, to catch redfish? And I'm like, my answer is always, it really just depends on the spot, like where you're fishing. And you deal with some very non-tidal stuff as well, but you also fish a lot of the tidal stuff. And it's like redfish, I mean, there's tides where they get a little more active, but they're pretty, they're going to eat if something's in front of them. If you're where they are at the tide that they're there, they're probably going to eat.
Right, absolutely. And if you and me are fishing the same general areas, or my buddy Will or any of these other guys fishing the same general areas, well, heck, I might be have a pretty solid bite on a high tide, but not far away, and I don't know anything about it, and they've got a solid bite on a low tide, right, doing something a little bit differently. So it's all on, what you kind of stumble across and get a pattern going on is what you're going to go with. For sure.
I used to always get worked up about when someone else was catching fish somewhere at a different tide that I didn't understand. I'd be like, God, but now it's almost encouraging to me. It's like, all right, there's still a lot for you to learn. Like there's still so many things for me to put together and learn that's constantly shifting and changing. So what used to freak me out and frustrate me now is like an encouragement of like, because sometimes I'm sure you know how it is. You'll get in a rut of like fishing the same stuff, and then it gets a little slow, and you're like, golly, the fishing sucks here. But it's like, wait, let's look back at my last 2 weeks. I've been doing the same freaking thing. I probably beat these fish up, or it's changing a little bit, and I think that I know everything. Like, but there's John over here is catching all these fish. It's like, it pushes me to change what I'm doing and constantly be learning. I feel like as soon as we become stagnant as fishing guys is when we start struggling.
Yeah, you definitely, have to have an open mind every single day, willing to learn and willing to adjust and stuff. But, kind of slightly on that topic, slightly off topic, the social media stuff and people's all the time, whether guides or just serious recreational guys putting up, somebody's going to have a good day.
Right.
Every day.
Yeah.
And whether you just comparing yourself to other people, you can't fall in that funk, you get guilty of it too. And as well as I do, if a serious guy that gets to fish a lot that's not carrying clients, that's a totally different ballgame than guys that are trying to get clients and stuff sometimes, and beginners to fish. That you definitely can't fall in that funk of trying to compare yourself to other people, because somebody's going to have a good day, whether it's you or the 10 million other people that's posting up every redfish they catch.
Right. So, no, I'm with you, man. And I've definitely been very guilty of that, of allowing myself to get frustrated with myself, or not depressed, but just like in a total funk of like, golly, and pissed because someone else is catching them. And you never know if they're being honest or dishonest or whatnot on social media.
Stuff like that all the time too. But not to dwell on that, but just the mental side of things.
Right.
If serious fishermen really want to go out and learn, specifically redfish, but anything in general, man, you just got to keep that positive, clear mental attitude all the time, and don't try to compare. Don't just focus on what you need to learn and what's happening in front of you.
Yeah.
And these podcasts and videos and stuff nowadays, it's great for people to learn stuff off of, but nothing even compares to time on water.
Not even close.
And have an open mind. That's another thing, that I'll be honest, I don't hardly ever watch fishing videos, or unless my boy's watching them and I happen to be in the room. And we try to share, people like us try to share as much knowledge as we can to help people, but at the same time, we need to convey that, this isn't black and white. Nothing is black and white in fishing, or in anything in the outdoors or in the wild, man. Because you could be doing the same thing for 50 years and then still every day see something that kind of blows your mind, like, dang, I would have never thought of that. But if you keep that open mind, you can see those little things.
Definitely. I like the way you put that. I've never had someone say it like that, but that it's not black and white. It's just constantly changing. There's like trends, but trends can change and shift and whatnot. And I'm with you 100%. Like there is, absolutely nothing that replaces that time on the water. And really, like, watching videos and listening to podcasts, it helps, but it can hurt you. You can get too sucked into following the little tiny things that people are saying instead of just getting out there and letting the water and the fish show you what you need to be doing.
Yeah, you obviously want to absorb as much knowledge, whether it's from, fishing with great guys and pushing your limits, your abilities like that, and from the podcast, YouTube video stuff. You want to absorb as much as you can, but then you still got to have an open mind and don't miss the big picture while you're out there.
Yeah. Yeah. So with
one turn diving out in the middle of the bay, and you kind of see something that's. But there would never be no redfish over there. Well, hell, there might be 200 of them there.
Yeah, dude, that's the best thing nowadays is when you're just completely surprised and like dumbfounded at they're not supposed to be doing this, and you get out there and there's fish where you're not supposed to be.
I caught one of my people yesterday. We landed a 45-inch old drum in a school of slotfish, which it was mixed in 2 feet of water.
That's
right?
Awesome.
But you're not supposed to do that because the big drum only show up in August and September around the full moon, and you can only catch them on artificials around pokey bait balls in 12.5 to 13.5 feet of water. People have that mindset. You got to throw that stuff out. I seen them fish the day before and couldn't get any big ones to eat, and then we just happened to out of the school hook one and missed a few other big fish.
That's awesome. That's super.
But they're not supposed to be there.
Right. Just like one thing that just popped in my head is when I'm like, clients are working a topwater plug, and I'm like, all right, never stop the topwater plug for redfish. And then they like throw it out, and then they turn around, they're talking to me, and the redfish smokes it while it's sitting still in the water. I'm like, all right, don't listen to anything I'm saying.
When we get into big popping corks for the old drum, once we really start hitting that stuff hard, I think I can remember 3 times. That's a lot of work and it can be a grind, right? So when we're doing this, and a lot of anglers don't really realize, especially, if somebody wants to sit down and kind of halfway work the cork and it's like dragging behind the boat, and I'm like, man, we need to, cast the head of the boat, and you're probably not going to ever get eat back there. So like right away. That's happened like 3 times. I'm like, you really need to cast the head of the boat and work. So I'm like, well, we caught a fish, maybe we look like an idiot, but
oh man, that's so true. It's constant, man. It's constantly like it's just a little gut check, like. But you're trying to go off those past trends and things that have happened and be helpful.
Try to keep motivated and all that stuff, and it's just funny when it happens. And then what do? Everybody else wants to start dragging.
Yeah, everyone throws behind the boat. You're like, oh gosh, this is not good. Oh, that's funny. That's super funny. Well, let's talk a little bit about, I kind of like where this is going and talking about, being flexible in the water and kind of going off of what you're seeing. So when you are starting a day, do you oftentimes start like you've got your plan the night before? You know where you're going? Is it like a very tight-knit plan? Or are you the kind of guy that's like, I think I'm going to start here. We'll get out there and see what the wind's doing. How does your kind of planning process go for a day on the water?
A lot of times I'll have like a good solid mental plan. More times than not, we're gonna veer away from some of that. Veer away from it at some point. Depending, obviously, always the wind is doing something different than what we think it's gonna do.
Right.
The wind to me plays, especially on the noose and the sound, the Panico sound. The wind is almost everything up there, depending on where it's coming, how hard it's blowing, if it's pushing water in or sucking water out. But even, down the Beaufort, Moorhead area, fishing the tides, especially artificial fishing. So Yeah, say I have a good mental plan, but almost never stick to it 100%.
Right, right.
I'm not super technical, not super by the book, so not to sound all like philosophical or something, but just kind of get the feeling for the morning.
For sure.
I might not
sure.
make it to my first spot that I've got in mind before I start changing course, just because I don't feel it.
Yeah, that's like me. I usually roll into a day with 3-4 spots that like I want to hit at maybe a certain tide that day, and then there's like a lot of filler, and then that might change depending upon if I get on one bank and it's really good, and I'm like, oh crap, and then something pops in my head. I need to go over here and check this area. When I used to guide down in Louisiana, man, I would have like a pretty strict plan I would follow. I mean, I'd kind of break it a little bit, but I would really sit there and look at the wind in the morning because it's so much water. That's why I was wondering with the Pamlico and the noose if you had something you followed a little bit more. But I would kind of plan my run out, protected little edges and fish stuff like that. But here with it being smaller water, I definitely kind of fly by the seam of my pants a lot more. So
I definitely when we're on the artificial stuff, which is 90% of what I do probably. Is trying to get on the leeward side of something, and I might plan on going in the back of the bay to look for reds, but then see a lot of life out by the point, maybe change gears and trout fish for a little while, a straight stretch. So it just kind of
for sure.
A lot of flying by the seat of your pants, but with like a decent direction.
Right. Yeah, that sounds good. So what are some of the trends you're looking for this time of year for redfish in your area? And maybe kind of go into your more coastal area and then your coastal river area a little bit as well.
Yeah, so more down on the coastal and with the so real quick. So and I don't know if we've really clarified it. Some people might not be aware that the noose and the Pamlico Sound primarily is all a wind-driven tide, not lunar-driven tide.
Yeah.
So coastal area is more lunar-driven tide, where you can actually read the tide table and be out there and know. So yeah, we actually have tide changes. So down there, most of what I like to do down that way is going to be high tide fishing. The flats, and not like Spartina grass flats or anything like that. Just big sand grass flats, oyster bars, hard bottom kind of stuff as well around the edges. So that's primarily when I'm looking to do that. I'm wanting a high tide that I can fish. Start getting in there a couple hours before and then still be able to fish it a couple hours after. So a really early high tide or a really late high tide in the daylight hours is challenging.
Yeah.
You might not get as much time in that, and then we'll have to fill part of the day or the trip with, running out and casting for Spanish or bluefish or something close by. So that's one benefit of fishing that stuff down that way is we've got some really good backup plans if either the fish move, they don't show up, that sucks for whatever reason, or we only have 2 hours for whatever reason to fish that stuff and still got a couple hours left on the trip. We can go do other things. But yeah, so the summertime, I like seeing lots of bait. Mullet, shrimp is the bomb. But bait, I want to see life, and something Will kind of Will Jones was talked on your thing before. So I'm fishing. I'm nothing sexy or anything. Just a big utility flat skiff is what I'm fishing. And so I can get pretty shallow with it, but just because I can get on that tide, and this is what I'm getting at that Will told me, just because I can get on some of these flats doesn't mean the fish are there.
Right.
So I might be wasting time, and he's fishing a bay boat, so it takes him a little bit longer to get on some of these areas. But, and sometimes I'm still learning all this stuff, man, so all the time learning. So it's just timing when to be on the flats is just because you can get there doesn't mean the fish are going to be there.
100%. Man, I couldn't agree with that more. And that's something I learn more and more every year, because every little spot or like even an edge of a flat or a part of a bank, fish will start to use it at a different tide. And they're waiting. They know when the most productive time for them to be on a spot is. And so when you can learn that and you can time your day around like when to slide into areas and onto areas, if you're fishing like turns around big time. I see that a lot in our like lower Cape Fear River, through our Cape Fear River. you get up into like the real tight creek stuff around Wrightsville, Topsail, and all that. Those fish are more like just kind of locked into spots back in these little tight creeks, and it doesn't play true as much. But you get into bigger bodies of water, and those fish are like, they are like a well-timed machine as far as when they use certain spots. Do you see that a good bit on some of that stuff up there as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then the higher that tide gets, the tighter they push to like the actual exposed grass,
right,
shorelines and stuff like that. So, and then pretty much just I like to get upwind on an area that I want to work, whether it be a shoreline or a really pretty grass flat, and try to get upwind, drift, so you're making the least amount of noise as possible, running the trolling motor as little as possible, and you can make longer casts with the wind, throwing top water, and, spoons, whatever, your bait of choice is, which, everybody has their own theory, and as I was just telling somebody yesterday, and I've told a lot of people this, and something else I picked up from my good friend Gary Dubio. The best bait to throw is the one that you got the most confidence in.
Yeah. That's very true.
We'll call it, we got to have this special top water, this color, that color. Obviously, I've got my favorites, you've got your favorites, Will has his favorites, and we could all go out and do really good or really bad with the same, or we all just kill it with it because we're fishing that color or that specific bait with confidence every single cast. If you give me a color and I'm like, dang, I hate this color, I don't never catch nothing on this, I'm not going to fish it like I mean it, so I'm not going to catch anything on it. But you can spank me on that same one. Right.
That's funny. The other day, I was running a double boat trip with my buddy Alan Kane down here, and we were bait fishing for them. Well, I was bait fishing. I had a dad and two kids that had really never fished, and he had the brother-in-law and his son that had done a bunch of fishing. So they were doing some bait fishing and some artificials. I was just bait fishing. Alan had like a 6-inch chartreuse like paddle tail on. I was like, God, dude, he's not gonna catch crap with that thing. Like, I don't fish that down here this time of year. And he caught like 4 redfish on it and a 25-inch trout. And I was like, well, dang, I need to start fishing a paddle tail, like a big chartreuse paddle tail. So,
right. So if you like a gold spoon, throw your gold spoon. If you like the dark copper spoon or a certain brand, or with a little skirt or without a little skirt, or a silver spoon, whatever you got the most confidence in. Make long casts, cover ground until you can start. And the more you pick these spots apart, the more that you'll learn, okay, I like this typically holds the fish. I've never caught a fish in this 90% of the area, but every time I come through here, I get a bite or two over here or find a school in this area. That, and so you really just key in on those areas.
Yeah.
But kind of back to, you were talking about bait fishing with kids, and we briefly talked about this before we started. And I tell people all the time that which redfish are just awesome anyway.
Yeah.
But in my mind, on a technical pole and skiff and casting to tailors and stuff, it's like the holy grail. But what's so awesome about redfish is no matter your style or what you like or your skill level, redfish accommodates you.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, they do.
So we can get the flats, or if that, for whatever reason, which we're starting to get a lot of pressure in some of our areas, so that's going to, that doesn't help things on the really shallow water fish. So for whatever reason, you can't fish that stuff, man, get some cut bait and go and fish structure, docks and pilings, drop off deep water. If you got kids and obviously we got little kids or anglers that don't get to fish that much. They can't be on the bow of a little skiff, casting 70 feet to a tailor, obviously. So let's go show them a good time, and we'll go spot lock or anchor up on some of these areas and bait fish and give them some fish.
Definitely.
That's what's one of the things that's so awesome about redfish is no matter what your style is, you can do it. You got a big boat and it's blowing 30 up on the sound. There's nothing a red drum loves better than rough water.
Yeah.
Whether it's on surf, on the sound, and obviously those type of conditions aren't conducive for throwing artificial lures or flies, but man, they really get turned on with that white water with the bait fishing.
Yeah.
So whatever can and people love to do that, and whatever floats your boat, you can do with redfish.
For sure. And man, honestly, like it's like the grass is always greener, and I do a lot of the shallow water stuff, but like recently I've been just so jealous talking to people up there. I'm like, I would love to just have the bait fishing in the sound on blown out, like just blown up banks, white water. Like that just sounds so much more fun than any of it to me now. It's like, but then I'd go do that for 3 months, and then I'd be like, oh, I want to go, sight fish redfish, and so that's how it goes.
It's not something I want to do all the time, but like I said, you get people and they have one day that they can fish. They've took vacation to this. They've come in a long ways. Instead of making them grind it out on a time, and you could find some spots and get a couple bites or something like that, but instead of like just totally grinding it out, and if they're down with it and they're not super skilled, we go out and we'll just do the bait thing.
Definitely. People, man, no matter what they say, once you start catching some fish, they'll stop talking about how they just want to throw a fly rod. You know what I mean? So, But that's super cool. One thing that you said a second ago that really stood out to me, I think a lot of people make this mistake, is you were talking about as the tide gets higher, the fish get closer and closer to the grass. But a lot of the areas you're fishing up there, like, you're not necessarily fishing the bank. You're fishing off the bank. You're fishing secondary edges and whatnot. How much do your fish relate to the bank in those areas? Like, how important is it to kind of push yourself to not fish up tight to the bank at times? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Just kind of from what... this is down in the coastal stuff with the lunar tides. You can find them in the deeper edges and stuff like that where the cutouts are, but for the most part, if it's just like a grass point or island or whatever, and you can see 6-8 inches of the mud exposed, and it's not like a cut around like where it ain't washed out any deeper. Yeah. Most of the time, those fish aren't going to push up on. To my opinion, a lot of the areas I like to fish. Yeah. The fish really are. I'm not going to pound those shorelines until that water starts getting into that grass. Right. Like I said, it goes back to just because I can get there with my boat doesn't mean the fish are going to be there. They're still, for the most part, either going to be, on a little 2 or 3, 4 foot cut around where an oyster bar and some currents moving at that point, or they're going to be out for 200, 300, 400 yards off. They might be way off the shoreline, out on a flat. That's can be that time can be a little bit trickier to find, and that's where you just 2 or 3 good anglers and just making long casts, fan casting and drifting with them, and until you can locate them like that, and just hope. And I'm shooting for a few single bites here or there, with always every day wanting to find that school of fish. Now, some days you find a school, some days you just pick away and you get your 6, 12, 15 whatever single bites, and just have that mind ready where I want to find that school, but you got to make them long casts down ahead of the boat. That way you get the boat to stop before you spook anything. For sure.
That's a good point, man. That was happening to me yesterday. I was getting blown down a bank, and we had a blow up on the Topwater out of a school, and it was too close because we weren't getting long enough casts, and it was mostly my fault because of the way I was kind of angling the boat. But the same thing happened. We had that one blow up, and I'm like with the push pull sticking it, trying to stop the boat. The fish are waking towards the boat, and I blew them all out. And then another group came. Same thing happened because we weren't given enough space. But yeah, it's you get sucked in sometimes, like picking out little spots instead of really just trying. You really need one person like picking stuff apart and another person just covering that distance.
Absolutely. So. And then talking about the more inland stuff on the sound and everything, a lot of that stuff is shoreline, we're more shoreline dependent, especially if the water's, which the water raises and falls up there, it's just not on the schedule. So if the water's in the grass, and I don't want, most of the time, until I get a pattern for that day, I'm not going to have everybody pound the shoreline, because a lot of nice trout come from a far cast off the outside of the boat. Right. And that's, so I know people get tired of hearing me say, long cast downwind or cast off the far side of the boat, and it's hard, especially if you got somebody that's bass fishes a lot or bass fishes some, and they just want to pound that bank, right. And then their kid like flip out half a cast behind us off to the side and catch a 24-inch trout, popping. Right. I can't get no bites off. Like I've been trying to tell you for an hour. Make some off the far side of the boat. For sure. That's a little bit different than the red fishing down there, but yeah, it's the same thing, man. And then I don't know. It just, you get 2 bites off the side of the boat, the deep side of the boat, working in shorelines. Then it's like, okay, you might be on to something here. Then maybe they're not, home tight to the shoreline today, or a lot of people up this way, what I noticed, they get super, and this is the one thing I got kind of mad at over the last weekend, get very point and spot like mentality. Like, oh, I got to run, fish this point. I'm gonna make 10 casts. If I don't get a bite, I'm gonna run to the next point.
Right.
And I'm just like slowly working edges in between these points and picking away at trout and drum and flounder and everything. And I'm just watching all these boats just point to point to point to point to point moving around.
Right. You get a little bit of confidence built sometimes, and you start to run with it too early instead of like fully letting the day unfold. And everybody can be a victim of that, but man, it is it is frustrating when you do it yourself or when you see other people doing it. But yeah, that's cool. Is there so if you're fishing artificials around there, what do you? And I know we were talking about whatever you're confident in, but what is your confidence baits for?
Okay, so this time of year, redfish specifically, I'm liking topwater, gold spoons, darker stained waters, the spinnerbait stuff.
Yep.
But popping cork is still, dynamite. Just an oval, egg-shaped popping cork, 2 foot leader, whatever, and 1/8 ounce jig head, 3 or 4 inch soft plastic, either shrimp or paddle tail. Most of our water up there, for the most part, is going to be fairly stained, so brighter colors typically work better. White, chartreuse, that type of thing. So the popping cork's super effective. And if you're not like totally just like all I want is redfish, because we catch the trout to eat a spoon or whatever if you're covering the flat, but they don't eat it as frequently as, like, if I target a trout, I'm not going to throw a spoon.
Right.
That's me personally. So the popping cork's just a really good method to locate and pick apart an area.
Sure.
This way. So
do you fish many hard baits?
Topwater is, cover ground and scout with the topwater. If you can get a couple rolls, even if you don't, hook them or whatever. All right, then we're gonna stop here and pick apart this area and kind of dissect it with the popping corks and see what happens.
Yeah, for sure. Do you find yourself fishing many subsurface hard baits up there in the summertime?
I don't. I'm not a huge MR guy or anything like that. So
for sure,
you could. I'm sure the guys that fish those and like to fish those can get away with, probably have pretty good fishing on them. Same, if you really technical, you could work a swim bait with like jig head as well. Right. If the water's clean enough.
You're like me though. If I'm going to be blind casting, like, you might as well be throwing something with a lot of presence in the water, like something that's loud and colorful, and that they're going to see and key in on.
And you and I going out fishing, I'm like, when we go out with clients, we might fish a little bit differently.
Right.
Than the way we fish, and and as bad as I don't know to say, we get a whole wide range of clients. So the popping cork is a technique that most people can pick up on and be effective.
Yeah.
Walking the dog with a skidder rock can be challenging for a lot of people. We'll try, if I think the conditions are right, try to get them, and some people just aren't going to pick it up in a 5-hour trip or whatever. So we've got to kind of figure out what we can do with what the skill levels we're working with. And so I really like the popping corks up on the side. It's an effective way to fish.
I'll tell you this, and you might already know that or have tried these or used this, but man, I picked up a couple wake baits like 2 years ago for clients. Like, if the topwater bite's good and I've got someone that can't throw a plug, and you just pitch that wake bait out there and just reel it back to the boat. It's like a square bill and just wobbles hard, pushes a V like a mullet. And sometimes I'm like changing the dude that can walk the dog over to a wake bait because they're eating the wake bait better. But it's been a good filler for people. And I feel like more times than not, the walk the dog plug is usually the superior topwater bait. But if someone's like, man, I really want to catch one on topwater, and they can't get that walk down, because you know how important it is. I mean, sometimes they're just going to eat it because it's moving on the surface. But a lot of times it's like it's got to have that exact cadence.
It's got to be right, yeah. And I like to throw popper, just a chug bug or whatever for striped bass and for trout. But I can't get slot redfish to eat a popper. So it's like, I don't know if you've ever run into it.
I've struggled.
I don't know if I've ever caught. I'm sure we have, but just so the walk the dog and technique, but I have to check them other baits out.
Yeah, for sure. The wake bait's a cool bait. It's just simple and easy. It's just a reel, and most of them have like a heavier ball in it, so it still has a good knock to it as it wobbles back and forth. But yeah, the popping cork, man, it's a hard one to beat. It is a hard bait to beat.
Popping cork, topwaters, and then if you're finding some fish in shallower waters, the spoons, and
For sure. Do you when you're fishing an area up there? Let's just say on the Sound, because we talk a lot about the coastal marsh stuff, because that's what I'm around mostly. When you're in an area, how long is enough? Like, when do you know, like, all right, they're not in here, this spot's not working, I need to change it up? Like, what's kind of your telling factor of when you need to move around?
It's hard to like make a black and white statement on that. I will probably typically fish an area longer than a lot of people would. I try to, I tell people all the time there's a fine line between being patient, being hard-headed, and we're all the time like riding that line. And the longer I do this, the more patient I'm able to get. Before I started guiding, or even when I'm fishing, I still catch myself doing it. It's easier for me to be patient and dissect an area when I'm not fishing. So if I still like feel pretty confident that like, and these fish move a lot, okay? So they like certain areas, but
right.
Just because I had them here today doesn't mean they'll be here tomorrow, kind of thing. But if I'm seeing the bait and I just like feel it feels fishy, I'm gonna keep covering shoreline until I run across a school of fish.
Yeah.
Maybe I know that it bites me in the butt sometimes, but moving around too much is gonna bite you in the butt.
You can't catch them while you're running. That's the thing. Yeah, I'm with you.
There's times where if the bait just like it's lifeless, there's no birds nowhere, there's no bait, nothing. I'm not going to stay there very long. I might give it 20, 30 minutes or whatever, and keep moving, just to make sure I'm not missing something. But if I've got the life, I'm gonna keep fishing for the most part.
That scenario you just talked about always sucks guiding, when like you run into a spot, you come off plane, you start pulling or you start trolling, and you're like, God, I did not need to be here. But so often my pride is like, I can't just hop back on the motor right away. Like sometimes I do, and other times I'm like, all right, let's just keep looking. I know I'm wasting our time.
Absolutely. I've come off and put the trolling motor in and start, maybe not even getting ready to hand rods out and look around. I'm just like, all right, guys, we're moving.
I'm not feeling this. Yeah, it's that weird fish sense that kicks in.
Yeah, and that's just all. It all boils back down to confidence and time on the water.
Yeah,
and nothing can replace that.
Yeah,
and the more you do it, that's why these guys, these old salts, they're obviously they're smart, but just they've got that sense, and the only way you can get that sense is being out there doing it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, sweet, man. Well, we're at about 40 minutes. We'll probably wrap her up. Is there anything else you want to share, redfish wise? Any other stuff? It's been really good. I've enjoyed this podcast. So there's nothing that's completely.
Yeah, obviously, we want to try to cram in a little bit of everything from the flats up to the Sound and everything in between with structure and deep water and stuff. And we're not super technical and break everything down, other than just kind of letting people know that everything is possible.
Yeah.
But we could talk for 4.5 hours on and not cover everything.
Right.
So, but just if anybody could take something away from this, just having an open mind when it comes to fishing in general, but specifically redfish, because no matter what your style or the area that you like to fish, more than likely you can catch redfish doing that type of style. For sure,
most definitely. Tell people where they can find you if they want to book a trip, what your website is, and all that stuff.
My website's captainbates.com, and that's spelled out.
Sweet.
BATS.com. And
I'll have all that linked to you guys too, for if you're listening or watching on YouTube, so you can slide on over and hit him up and book a trip. And you're about to start up your bull redfish stuff here pretty soon, aren't you? End of August.
Yeah, we're right. The last. And it's like nothing's on the counter. Like I said, we've already been catching some, but the last week of July, I'll probably really start focusing and trying to put some patterns together on some schools of fish, and then starting August and September, really grind hard on the big fish.
Yeah, sweet. Do you still have some openings for that if people want to reach out and go target those big bull classes?
Still have plenty of openings August and September on that.
Sweet.
So.
Well, yeah, if y'all want to catch big redfish, definitely hit Andy up for that time frame. But I'm looking here. I've had my monitor pulled up too, and my son's waking up on the thing. He got some shots yesterday, and he is not sleeping good. So he's got a little fever running. Yeah, I feel bad for him. But man, thank you so much for coming on. We'll have to do another one.
Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad we're able to make it happen. Would love to do some more, and hope y'all were able to learn a little bit about some red fishing, and definitely be encouraged like I was that just keep moving and let that good day kind of tell you what you need to do. So sometimes you can get sucked into pattern or a little rut, but keep on grinding. All right, guys. We'll see y'all next week. Later.